Howdy ho guys, and welcome to another Bojan vlog. Hiya, my face is a bit bigger than my previous vlog, because I think last entry I was kind of experimenting with a new camera angle, I guess, which is really just another way of me saying that I was being lazy, setting things up, but nonetheless, hope you guys are well. In this entry, I wanted to provide, I wanted to speak on something that is very central to the message I have on this channel, which is, of course, tapping into your sensitivity. I have been making these vlog entries for a while now, and I think I started like 2014. Well, if you count like the Broachinian Preachers skits that I did as well, then like 2013 is when I started. And so I've been doing these for a while, and there have been many concepts I've given in these entries, many perspectives. As you know, if you watch these vlog entries, then you'll know that I'm someone who likes to explore different perspectives because, well, I'm going to talk about this in the entry after this one. But that in itself is one thing. Having given all of these concepts and explored these perspectives, like there have been a few things that have stuck with me in terms of the message I have to give in these entries. There's one obvious one which is kind of the more, like do what you love kind of a thing, right? That's one of my messages. But like in terms of what I have to offer towards like happiness, like in a more kind of emotional sense, as opposed to practical. The first one is, like I mentioned, explore, build your perspective, right? But the second one is tap into your sensitivity and emotional nirvana, you could say. Emotional mastery, emotional intelligence is something I'm big on, and it has stuck with me all this way, and I believe it to be one of the most important things that I can say, that I can provide in terms of a message, and so like in this entry I wanted to kind of use that, tap into your sensitivity as the kind of central idea, or like the origin point from which the kind of insights that I'm going to provide now spring from. Just to give you guys a bit of a basis. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, then I urge you to kind of go back to watch any of my videos about sensitivity, tapping into your sensitivity, and just in general like emotional mastery, healing. I've done many entries about that. It's something that I'm really passionate about. And so to be honest, like what I'm really providing this entry is not anything new or necessarily groundbreaking relative to what I've provided already in terms of like ideas, but it is nonetheless an important reminder, because, and not so much a reminder in terms of like telling whoever's watching this what to do, like I need to remind you to do this. Rather, it is a reminder that we are okay. It is a reminder that despite all of the problems that we may be facing in life, that we're okay and that we're not alone. That's the kind of reminder I want to give in this entry. On top of course, my usual kind of preaching style, like, this is the way forward. But in actuality, right, so let me just kind of go ahead and list, I guess, just kind of list the things I want to talk about. So, yeah, so there's a difference between passion and qualification, right? And that's what I've written down here in my notes, but like essentially what this means, just as a brief kind of like preamble before I go into it, right, is essentially, the difference between passion and qualification is essentially your energetic state, right? Which is why I said that all of this that I'm about to say springs from my concept of tapping into sensitivity, and in general, like the whole idea that we have lost our connection with our feeling, essentially. And it's not necessarily we've lost connection, but like rather we have become distrustful of it, you know, in favor of, like, you know, logic and like just, you know, conceptualization of things, you know. I do realize it's quite dark, but I think I'll lower this light so that, yeah, there we go. I think that should be okay for now. Be better if, like, I get it to this level. So if you just give me 1 second. Okay, got my little bread box thing here so I can rest my light on it. Sweet, that's the right level now. Right, okay, so the difference between passion and qualification is your energy, you know, where you're coming from. This also ties into what I've talked about in terms of light versus shadow motivation, right? You know, essentially, passion is something that kind of comes from a feeling that you have, right? Whereas qualifications or accolades, you know, like proof, evidence, that comes from a more cerebral place, right? It comes from a more kind of like, I don't necessarily feel this way, but like if I have this thing, it proves that I am a certain way, kind of thing, right? And so this is kind of one of the major problems that people face nowadays. In terms of, like, of course, you know, whoever's watching this is awakened, you know, and there are lots of people in the world awakening, but like the people who don't yet, you know, who don't yet see the light, if you will, you know, they're not quite ready to make the transition into consciousness, you could say. You know, they struggle with the idea that, like, there is a difference, or the, you know, even the kind of notion that there is a difference between something that you genuinely care about and love versus like having and possessing things that prove that you love something, right? And so I'm going to talk about this. And also the other point was essentially it is how to deal with addiction, you know. So what is your genuine desire, right? Because, and you know, the people who haven't yet found the courage and the self-confidence to trust in their experiences and trust in their feeling, right? You know, the ones who are kind of like pining over like the kind of promise of love, as I talked about in one of my previous entries, you know, they tend to succumb to addiction, right? And like, of course, you don't have to be, you know, your average person who like is not awakened or you know, anything like that to have addictions or like to succumb to addictive behavior. One of the key realizations that we all make as conscious beings, you know, awakening, is that we all, you know, we're all kind of like, no one person is better than the other in terms of like no one person is exempt from the same kind of behavioral impulses that certain other people have. And so, like, again, you know, there is kind of dichotomy between the temporal perspective, which is like, I am separate from you, and the eternal perspective, which is like, you know, we're all one, you know, and ultimately we all come from the same source, right? The same divine source. But that's kind of what I want to talk about. And so there was actually something else I wanted to talk about, but like in listing that, I think I've kind of forgotten. But nevertheless, so this is where things get challenging, you know, in terms of like, you know, like, what do you trust? You know, what information do you trust? What do you trust? Do you trust information, or do you trust your feelings, right? And this is the problem. So, you know, actually, yeah, this is kind of leading into what I was going to say, which is that I teach sensitivity and I teach, you know, like heart-centered living, essentially. You know, that's one kind of another like more popular label for it, is because I happen to be someone who has the propensity towards this kind of thing, but also because I feel that the you know, the world that we live in kind of requires it at this point, because at the moment we're faced with kind of an imbalance, you know, on the surface of things, which is that, you know, people are disconnected in general, you know, from their feelings, and like I said before, which, you know, it's more of a distrust, it's more of a resistance against feeling, right? Particularly if that feeling is something that we find embarrassing and things like that, you know. But having said this, and despite this being my major message in these videos, energetic sensitivity, or rather heart-centered living, is not necessarily the right way to live, right? And I say this in the conventional sense of right and wrong, in terms of like, is this the ultimate answer? You know, is this the thing that is going to pull us away from the dysfunction of a cerebral society? No. The truth is that energetic sensitivity, in the way that I teach about it, is really just another perspective. You know, it's really just another pole of the dipole that is the dualistic kind of truth, you could say, of this physical reality that is predicated upon contrast and duality. So what I'm saying is that, like, despite my message of, like, you know, like, the answer lies in tapping into what's in your heart and what you feel, that isn't necessarily better than, like, you know, thinking about it, like, you know, the usual kind of like logic and science, right? Again, it's just a perspective, and ultimately what we ought to strive for, although even saying this is kind of a bit fallacious, you know, in the sense that, like, it's not the entire truth, you know, nothing's ever the entire truth when we speak words about it, but, or even when we conceptualize it, but, like, you know, we were trying to strive for a balance between these things, right? And of course, it is difficult for me because, again, you know, like, I have kind of an affinity towards this kind of thing. You know, I'm naturally someone who, you could, you know, put a gun to my head. You know, you could put a gun to my head and say, you know, you can't do what you love. You have to do what I tell you to do. And I might play along and, you know, I might kind of stuff that down for a minute, but, like, you can't change who you are sometimes, you know. As kind of fatalistic as that sounds, but, like, if you're someone like me and you're just someone who, like, who has to live in a heart-centered way, it doesn't matter what external stimulus comes up, like, it's your nature, you know. You can't help but to do how you feel, you know. But anyway, and so yeah, so what I'm saying essentially is that, like, this is merely a perspective that you might find helpful, particularly if you resonate with the kind of more energetic, heart-centered side of things. But anyway, let's get on to the meat of things, shall we? So, passion versus qualification. So, to be honest, like, again, another thing is that, like, whoever I'm speaking to in these videos, you know, the kind of person who would listen to these videos is not someone who is not into spirituality, you know, who isn't into kind of like consciousness kind of a thing, And so whoever's watching this probably already like understands most of what I say intuitively. You know, I'm not really saying anything that no one already doesn't know. But like, yeah, you know, it's really just like, you know, how do we kind of justify it to, you know, to ourselves kind of thing. You know, this is kind of, in a sense, me justifying my own knowledge against like what someone else might say who is kind of anti-spirituality or like anti-heart-centered living. But the difference between passion and qualification is massive. You know, despite the fact that like it seems, you know, in the beginning and you know, on the surface to be very similar, right? And this also ties into another concept, the axis of perception that I coined, which is, you know, again, this very thing, you know, what do we trust, feelings or logic or symbolism, right? And on the surface, it might seem that whatever comes out from passion versus qualification is the same. And rather, what I mean by that is that, like, so the thing that arises from passion and from someone who is just chasing qualification. So, for example, you know, someone who someone who studies for a degree, let's just say, or studies in some area of expertise, you know, some craft, who creates a product, you know, a work of art, right? You know, versus someone who maybe hires someone to do it, right? Or uses some kind of shortcut to attain the same goal. You know, you could argue that both of those people have the same thing, you know. Like you know, like for example, you know, the person who is really in love with music, you know, going back to my own example, but like who is really in love with music and makes a lot of music and makes a living that way, you know, that very kind of grassroots way, which I love, versus someone who kind of goes through the machine of, you know, record companies, you know, media, that kind of thing. You could argue that they both are musicians, you know, but like the difference here is that like one of them is genuinely passionate about what they do, whereas the other person might be in it for validation, for fame, you know, which is really the same thing, for money, you know, for safety, you know, and so one essentially is a light motivation and the other one is a shadow motivation, right? You know, so what I'm trying to drive at is that like passion is something that you do for the sake of it. You know, it's something that you actually enjoy, and enjoyment is not something you can quantify, you know, which is the kind of reason why a lot of people kind of like they can't connect to what they're passionate about, because we're kind of pulled away from that in a way, you know, in terms of like we have to give reasons why we love things, and sometimes a reason, such a simple reason such as I love doing this thing, you know, there is nothing more that I would enjoy doing than this thing that I love. Like people kind of don't take that with any kind of significance, you know, because like you have to have this grandiose reason for why you're doing things. You know, I love it is kind of a bit, it sounds almost childish, right? But that is in fact, you know, you could argue, you know, and I'm making the argument that like it is the most powerful thing. The most powerful motivation is simply that you enjoy doing like what you do. You know, you have no other like kind of adequate explanation apart from I just love doing this thing. I think that is the most powerful thing, and that is what I mean when I say passion, right? And it's weird, like I get the feeling that like even though I've struggled to kind of carve my own path, because like I happen to have quite a few passions, But having kind of delved into them and done a lot of kind of inner exploration, like I've kind of uncovered like the kind of central, kind of like role / motivation behind them, which is I made an entry about the healer type, right? I am a healer type. Everything that I do is wanting to come from, at least in terms of career or like things that I put out in the world. Like I want them to be healing. I want them to heal and soothe people. That is why I'm in all of this that I'm doing. But yeah, I think that is the most powerful thing. But whereas there are a lot of people in the world who do things for the trophy, right? So I think I wrote an additional line here, but like, it's the, yeah, I wrote the battle scars versus the trophy. It's like, what would you rather want? Would you would you rather like just be doing the thing that you love and have all of these things appear, but like, and they're nice, but ultimately, your love for that thing is what sustains you, and this is the key ultimately, is that like something that you're passionate about is you'll do it for life and you'll have no regrets or complaints about it. A lot of people are fearful because they don't know what they're passionate about, essentially, or they don't trust or give value to what they're passionate about, truly passionate about, what they would do gladly for the rest of their life if they weren't paid for it, or not if they weren't paid for it, but like if their circumstances were to remain the same, what would they do for the rest of their lives gladly, that kind of thing. Versus like having all of these achievements and qualifications and accolades and symbols, trophies that prove in an external sense that you are what you say you are, and what happens if you go down that route is that you will feel empty, essentially, because if you need anything other than the thing that you love in order to make you happy, essentially, so in essence, if you need something external to prove to not only yourself but to other people that you are who you say you are, that you love what you say you love, then it's an illusion, right? And a lot of people do this, and there is a lesson in that itself, like if you go down the route of like chasing qualifications and like having this portfolio of amazing work, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, like like for example, like if you take you study and you get qualifications in that sense, and everything in your life, the only drive in your life is to achieve things that prove to other people that you're good or that you love what you say you love. Like that is kind of destined to lead you to a place of emptiness, because because the thing is, again, like I said, if you love what you do, it doesn't matter what you attain, what you achieve, what kind of qualifications people thrust on you, what kind of validation people give to you, because the key thing that's fueling you is your love, right? And you either love that thing, you resonate with the thing, or you don't, right? And this is tricky, and the reason I decided to talk about this is because we can have an idea of what we love, right? But nevertheless we can be steered down a path that is qualification seeking, that is not passion, So, for example, if you are a healer yourself, if you like if you're into the whole spirituality thing, and you know you're a vlogger, or you write blogs, or you write books, then like you just, even though you're in that discipline, right, you can fall in the pit, you can fall under the pitfall of basically doing things that have the label of spirituality, let's just say, or healing, but they don't resonate with you, right? So it's very, very tricky, right? And the world and society as it is currently trying to kind of take us away from what we love, right? From our passion, and to kind of almost persuade us to do something else, right? You know, and it uses shame and guilt to do that, right? It's like, you know, oh, you're a healer. Have you heard of this healing practice? Have you heard of this spiritual truth? You haven't? Well, you know, it's state of the art. That's, you know, just saying, you know, maybe you should look it up. Maybe you'd be better as a healer if you looked it up. And like that's how the world insidiously kind of takes us away from like what it is that we're truly passionate about, right? So I just wanted to make that distinction. And like, to be honest, again, it's just kind of, it's almost me ranting, because it's like, I understand this, but like sometimes, like, you know, when you deal with people and like just society in general, it's like it takes you away from that, and you just desperately want to tell them, you know, no, it's about what you love, you know, that's what's going to sustain you. But anyway, and the other thing that I want to talk about, like I said, is with genuine desire. And I was actually going to make separate entries for this, but like I thought I'd kind of, you know, I have so many ideas nowadays, and like because of everything else that's going on in my life at the moment, like I haven't really had the time. I haven't had the time as much time as I had before, you know, back in like the early days of the vlog, like to kind of go through every single idea and like make them into a vlog entry. But like hopefully like soon that's going to happen, because like yeah, I should have more time, because I'm quitting my job, and yeah, and I'm doing something else. So, you know, I'm slowly kind of going onto my path. But so genuine desire. Genuine desire is essentially the product of when we kind of look at our life, look at the things that we do habitually, you know, and if you kind of like have any kind of addictive things that you'd like to do, or habits or interests, then like it might be worth kind of delving into what it is that is making you addicted to those things, right? Because, you know, from what I've observed in my life, you know, like whenever people kind of like try to fix addiction in the same way that people try to fix illness, is that they try to kind of force a solution on it. You know, they try to kind of, they look at the symptoms and they're like, let's get rid of the symptoms, right? But they never look at the kind of core motivation, you know, the core kind of root of that thing, which I dare say, you know, like I assert that the thing that lies behind the, you know, the addictive behavior is it's pure, it's innocent, you know. For example, you know, sex is a good one, because sex is probably the number one thing that people the people are very, very kind of unconscious about. What is sex? Sex, I think, is merely, you know, there's excitement in there, you know. There's kind of intrigue and mystery and a bit of kind of catharsis, but like, I think sex mostly comes from the kind of desire to love, you know, to love, to feel pleasure. You know, pleasure and all of those things are really just kind of the body's desire to heal and to nourish itself. In the same way that you eat, you know, you don't see people saying like, you're eating, ugh, you know, and like you can almost say that like people are doing this already, you know, like, and like I don't necessarily want to slam like, you know, like veganism or like vegetarianism, but like there are people within those kind of subcultures where like it's like, you know, you're eating meat, ugh, you know, and it's like, well, you know, like to each their own, you know, like I don't really have a very strong opinion on that, but like my own opinion on that is that I do whatever makes me feel the best. You know, I'm not doing it for any kind of abstract mantra or belief. You know, like I've decided that eating meat is wrong for these logical reasons. That's why I don't do it. Like I don't do that. I do whatever feels best for me. You know, I trust my body and my feeling and my instincts. Or at least that's what I want to trust. You know. Yeah. So, what is your genuine desire? Like, if you suffer from addiction, or you know someone who suffers from addiction, then like, you know, like, what you can do is that you can start to build, you know, because it's going to take a bit of time, I guess, because there's a subconscious belief in there somewhere that like what you like to do is wrong, full stop, right? For example, you know, I'm not gonna divulge any kind of really personal information, but like I know someone who has a gambling problem in my life, and the kind of general approach that the people around them like to take on that is to kind of shame them into not gambling, you know. And of course, I know this is wrong. You know, I feel this instinctively is wrong, and it's like it's not going to work. You know. Most importantly, it's just not going to work, because when you have an addiction like that, you know, that like you just can't help but do, it means that there is a genuine desire in there that like has been suppressed and has been shamed into into unconsciousness. And so what we need to teach someone like that and ourselves is that like an addiction or any kind of habit, bad habits that we have, is merely you can view it as an unpurified desire, right? So the question we should be asking ourselves is, what are we trying to get from this thing that we keep doing? You know, what do I feel whenever I do this thing that is wrong? You know, well, you know, like in the example like I provided, that, you know, sex is merely, you know, the body's desire to heal and to feel joy and pleasure and love, right? You know, is, you know, like, for example, you know, with the person I know that has a gambling addiction, it's like, what is it that you enjoy about gambling? You know, let's just say that maybe gambling isn't the most resourceful thing you could do, right? Because I could list all of the reasons, really. You know, like you're not gambling on very intelligent terms, in terms of like, you know, you're kind of gambling into a system that someone designed to make as much money out of you as possible, right? But like, what is the thing behind the gambling addiction that is that is happening, that is making you want to gamble so much? You know, and then you identify that, right? And then how can you turn that into something positive? You know, that's it, you know, like, or like, how can you own the desire that exists behind that? You know, like, it's like, you know, I'll admit it, like, I'm a pervert. I'm a pervert. I think about sex all the time. You know, like, I masturbate. You know, like, I like sex, you know, like, I like that. I like, you know, sexuality. I like sensuality. And for the longest time I've always felt it was wrong, that like, being perverted was wrong. But like once I have started to kind of delve into that side of me, and also, yeah, just understand it, where it comes from, you know, like I've come to realize that it is very like I love it. I love the fact that like I'm a sexual person, that I'm a sensual person. I wouldn't change that. If anything, like I see that sexuality and sensuality could be used as healing tools to heal not only myself but other people, right? Like someone who might be kind of more resistant towards that kind of thing, more conservative, it's like, but like sex is wrong, it leads to pregnancies and it's just dirty and there's STDs and and like people cheat on you and they manipulate you and like you don't think you're just sleeping with that person and like they want something out of you, like they're gonna dump you. It's like, yeah, like, yeah, I get it. The world is not this perfect place. It's not, but like that doesn't have to mean that sex is directly linked to those things, right? It just so happens that like, it's the same as money, like, what's to stop like Bill Gates from like donating however many millions or billions of dollars towards some like charity cause? Can you argue that his intention behind that is bad? Someone out there can probably make some kind of argument, but like, it's like, yeah, like, you have to detangle, if that's even a word, untangle, sorry, English. You have to untangle kind of like the pure desire, the kind of genuine love and joy and pleasure that exists within you. The childlike wonder and, like when a kid really wants to do something, you see the excitement in his face, like that kind of innocence. We have to untangle that from like, the scary adult Machiavellian world that we live in. All of the kind of like, oh, but if you sleep around, you get STDs and like people cheat on you and like you'll hurt the people around you. It's like, no. I fucking hate that shit, to be honest with you. Like I hate when people try and guilt people out of doing things. Like I hate people who treat addiction like it's some kind of disease. It's not. It really is fucking not. Like it is just someone like, if anything, like the kind of guilt and the suppression that you pressure someone with when they have these addictive tendencies, that is the very thing that is perpetuating the addictive behavior. And like that is something that I just really wish that people would understand. It's like, and I know, I get it. The thing that lies behind that is fear. Like people are hurt by this kind of thing, and like they try and suppress it, they try and resist it, or like they ignore it, or they try and shame people out of it. It's like fucked up, man. But yeah, and like all of this, right, stems from a distrust of feeling, which goes back to my central teaching of tapping into your sensitivity, right? It's because we don't trust feeling that we get into these problems, that we fall in these pitfalls. It's because we over-conceptualize everything, and like everything has to be like a reason, and we don't realize that those reasons are abstract and completely ungrounded in like reality. The kind of reality that is like, I just really want to have an intimate physical experience with someone. I just want to do what my DNA tells me. I just want to fucking eat a donut right now, And like, I know it's bad for me, but like, and this is something that I want to talk about in the next entry, I believe. No, it is this entry. Okay, so like I kind of like, this is a kind of it's a very long entry because like I'm literally like kind of conjoining like 3 vlog entries together. Like I just thought I'd just do one massive one. But like, I'm at the point where like I prefer if either myself or someone else just does something that is wrong, that is not right, that is unpure, in the sense that like, well, of course there is a caveat to this, it's like, but the way that like the ego works and like the whole kind of internal kind of like convolution that happens within human beings is like, we have this addiction to being good in society, because like we all like to think that we're good people, like I very much like to think that I'm a good person and that I'm not like some kind of closet criminal, but the reality is that like sometimes when we place so much emphasis on being good, and conversely we resist so strongly, against being bad, that actually causes problems for us, right? I'll give you a tangible example. Like I want to be healthy, and so like sometimes like when I get urges to eat like some junk food or some really unhealthy snacks, like I kind of try to resist that, and like I'm like, oh no, maybe I should eat these greens or like these healthy snacks or whatever, right? But the thing is, right, the thing that I've discovered over the years from doing this so much is that like starvation is a lot worse than eating shit, essentially, right? And like this is one of the pitfalls that happens is that like when we kind of like when we're like no, when we kind of use the very kind of like oppressive method, the very kind of like surgical method of trying to excise like a bad habit or like something like that, a self-destructive behavior, like it's like or addictive behavior, like it actually it puts us in a state of starvation, and that state is actually more damaging than a state of like impure nutrition, if that makes sense, impure nourishment. Again, you can make arguments, like this isn't black and white, but like in my experience, I found that like for example, when I force myself to eat healthy foods, it actually sometimes backfires on me. Like for example, like I see these healthy snacks, right? And like I'm like, oh, maybe I'll try this, but like I get the feeling that like a lot of these healthy snacks like aren't so good for you, and if anything, like food companies probably capitalize on this. They realize that like people they capitalize on the fact that like fast food does so well, and that people like it's making people ill, it's making people sick. So here's the healthy alternative. Here's the healthy alternative that you can eat instead of that junk food, and it's like, but it's like worse. It's like probably worse for you, right? And so to me, it's better to just eat shit if that's what you truly want to do in that moment. And then what I've found is that like if you just give your body what it's craving, it naturally, organically moves to like better stuff anyway, right? That's the kind of like crazy irony behind all this. Is like we always try to force ourselves to do things, and this is another way that you can tell that like what you're doing is not aligned with how you feel and more aligned with some kind of abstract mantra that you're trying to do because it's supposedly what's good for you, right? It's like it's like the you feel shitty, basically. Like you feel shitty and you can't sustain it. Like whereas if you just give your body what it wants, or you let your body express itself in the way that it wants, then like you naturally get better anyway. Yeah, the bottom line is that we all have pain and fear and like, but and that's kind of what kind of causes us to get into this dysfunction. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's a choice, I guess, because like as wonderful as I make this sound sometimes, like to myself mostly, but like is like it's ultimately a choice. You know, I can't force anyone to do anything. I can't force anyone to kind of see things my way. I'm sure you've had the same experience. You know, like even though you just see how people essentially sabotage themselves. But like, it's not as though you can just force them to change, right? You can't, you know, you can keep doing it, but like, it's never going to work until they finally make the decision for themselves, the choice for themselves to actually change. And so, yeah, you know, this whole kind of like insensitivity to energy thing, like, it's not something you can necessarily teach, you know. It's just something you have to kind of come to your own realization of. And that's just how life in general works. But yeah, anyway, I think I'm going to wrap this up here. I hope my message was clear enough, you know, like that I got my message across. As I was saying at the kind of beginning of this entry, it's like I'm going to be quitting my job at the end of this month, and the idea is that like it's going to give me more time to do what I want, right? You know, and these vlogs are a part of that, right? And so like hopefully as I make this transition, like, you know, the quality of these vlogs are going to improve. And as I mentioned before, like I also want to kind of try some new things with this vlog as well, and hopefully, you know, start to get people involved as well. But like but yeah, you know, it's a slightly crazy and turbulent time for me right now, but like it's also really exciting for me, because it's like, you know when you're on the path, like, to doing what it is that you want to do, you know, a path that you're passionate about, like you go through so much shit, you know, but like at the end of it you're like, I'm so excited, because like, you know, I'm doing something that like I truly believe in. You know, I get the feeling that not a lot of people get to do this. You know, a lot of people are kind of trapped in their own self-imposed prisons, you know, like their safe comfort zones and their qualifications like chasing, and all of this bullshit that like most people are mired in. And you're like, you know, I am one of those people who's managed to kind of like fight that off, and I'm now on my way to doing something that I enjoy and I'm passionate about. And it's like, it's crazy, you know. So I'm excited. I'm definitely excited. And yeah, let's keep going, both of us. So okay, I hope that was insightful. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next entry. Thank you so much for watching this. Hope you're having a great day. Peace out, guys. Yeah.